Sears, Roebuck and Company sold firearms through the mail to anyone, not licensed dealers, not approved buyers, anyone who could write an address on an order form and enclose payment. There were no background checks. Rural free delivery carried the guns down roads that had no names, into hill country where the nearest store was a day's ride and the nearest federal courthouse was farther still. Number 4 on this list is a revolver that a man dropped in the dirt during a gunfight with lawmen, and it is sitting in a federal museum in Arkansas today. And number 1 is an ordinary catalog shotgun, shortened with a hacksaw, that ended up in front of the Supreme Court of the United States and produced the only ruling on the Second Amendment that American law would have for the next 70 years. These 15 guns came into the Ozarks the same way the flour and the boots and the seed corn came in, through the mail. And they were still there when the federal marshals rode into the hollows looking for stills. Hit subscribe. This list gets heavier the closer we get to number 1. Let's count them down. Number 15. The Quackenbush Air Rifle. It is listed in the 1901 Sears catalog gun section, on the same pages as the Winchesters and the Colts, and it is the smallest thing on this list. An air rifle. No powder, no cartridge, no report louder than a hand clap. It threw a lead ball hard enough to take a sparrow off a fence post and not much more. But look where it was printed. Sears did not put it in a toy section. It was in the guns, on the same spread, ordered on the same form, shipped in the same mail. A boy in a hollow could send for it himself. That is where the arming of the hill country began. Not with a rifle, with a page. It came out of a catalog, and it stayed in the hills. Number 14. The Hamilton Rifle. Also in the 1901 Sears list, and a step up from the air gun in exactly one respect. It fired a cartridge. The Hamilton was built to a price so low it was reportedly given away as a premium for selling newspaper subscriptions. Sheet steel, a wire trigger guard, a barrel a determined man could bend over his knee. Not built to last a lifetime. Built to be affordable to somebody who had never owned a gun. That was the whole business model. The mail-order houses were not competing for the man who already owned 3 rifles. They were reaching the man who owned none. The catalog was not selling quality. It was selling access. Number 13. The Flaubert Rifle. The Flaubert was not designed for the Ozarks. It was built for European drawing rooms, a low-powered indoor target rifle for gentlemen shooting at paper across a parlor. The Warnant system variant sat right beside it, both of them listed in that same 1901 Sears gun section. What arrived in Arkansas was a light, cheap, small-bore rifle that would kill a squirrel on ammunition costing almost nothing. A parlor toy in Europe. A meat gun in the hollows. The catalog sent an object. The hills decided what it was for. Number 12. The Stevens Crack Shot. A single shot, small-bore boy's rifle. Break it open, drop in a cartridge, close it, fire, repeat. It weighed almost nothing, and it was almost impossible to break. It sat in the 1901 catalog among the Stevens line, and it did a specific job. It was the first real gun, the one a father handed a boy at 9 or 10, with a warning about coming back with an empty cartridge and no rabbit. That mattered more than the gun did. Every rifle further down this list was picked up by a man who had learned on something like a crack shot. The catalog was not only arming the hills, it was training them. Number 11. The 8-gauge goose gun. Sears called it the Giant. 8-gauge, a bore you could nearly fit a thumb into, throwing a charge that belonged on a market hunter's punt boat rather than in a man's hands. It sat in the 1901 catalog beside the ordinary 12 gauges, like a draft horse in a line of ponies. It was sold as a waterfowl gun. But an 8-gauge does not care what it was sold for. At the range from a cabin door to the tree line, it was the most destructive thing a hill farmer could legally buy. And it was legal. Entirely, ordinarily legal, mailed to any address in America. No one in 1901 thought that was worth a second look. Understand what the catalog was in this part of the country. Richard Sears started out mailing watches in 1886. Within a decade, the book had become a 532-page lifeline running into farmhouses with no store within a day's ride. In many hill homes, there were 3 books total: a Bible, a school book, and the catalog. It was called the Farmer's Bible, and the name was not a joke. Local merchants could order things in, but with markups a hill family could not absorb. The catalog cut them out. Whatever a man could afford, he could afford at Chicago prices, delivered, including the guns. They came out of a catalog, and in the hills, they stayed. Number 10. The New England single-barrel shotgun. Sears gave it a full page in the 1908 catalog, the illustration blown up large enough that a man could study the lockwork from across a room. 1 barrel, 1 shell, 1 shot, and an automatic ejector that kicked the empty clear. Nothing clever about it and nothing to go wrong with it. This is the gun that stood behind the door. Not in a safe, not in a cabinet. Behind the door, loaded, for snakes and hawks and whatever came up the road after dark. Walk into 100 Ozark cabins in 1910 and you would have found one in most of them. It cost almost nothing and asked almost nothing. That is why it was everywhere. Number 9. The Frontier Bulldog. 5 shots, .44 caliber, a barrel 2.5 inches long, and a frame small enough to vanish under a coat. It was built by J.B. Ronge and Sons in Liege, Belgium, and it sold in America for $3.80. That is a Belgian revolver, made by Belgian workmen in a Belgian factory, sold through Sears and Montgomery Ward from the late 1870s to 1914, and carried in Arkansas and Missouri by men who could not have found Liege on a map. Think about the supply line. A gun crossed the Atlantic, cleared an American port, entered a Chicago warehouse, went into a catalog, and finished on a mail wagon in a hollow where the road ran out. Nobody signed anything. The mail did not care where a gun came from. Neither did the hills. Number 8. The Marlin Takedown Shotgun. Listed in the 1901 Sears catalog, and the name is the whole story. It came apart. A turn of a fastener and the barrel separated from the receiver, and what had been a full-length shotgun became 2 short pieces. Marlin built that for travelers. It fit a trunk, a saddlebag, under a wagon seat, and went back together in the time it takes to say so. But a gun that comes apart is a gun that can be carried without being seen. Marlin sold it as convenience. In country where a man might have reasons not to be observed walking toward a creek bottom, convenience and concealment are the same feature in different clothes. The catalog sold the feature. The hills found the second use for it. Number 7. The A.J. Aubrey revolver. Sears wanted a gun with its own name on it, so it put the Aubrey name on revolvers built by the Meriden Firearms Company. Hinged frame, chambered in .32 Smith & Wesson and .38 Smith & Wesson, with the Meriden monogram set into the hard rubber grips. That is a house brand, a store label on a tin of coffee applied to a firearm. A customer ordering an Aubrey was not buying from Meriden. As far as he knew, he was buying from Sears, the most trusted name that ever came through a rural mailbox. Trust made the whole trade work. A man who had never held the gun or met the maker sent his money to Chicago because the catalog said he could. While those guns were arriving, something else was riding into the same hills. From the 1870s to the turn of the century, United States Marshals rode alongside federal revenue agents through the Arkansas Hill Country, hunting illegal stills. The Ozarks and the Ouachitas were ideal ground for hiding a still and terrible ground for finding one. And the men in those hollows were not making whiskey out of wickedness. They were making it out of arithmetic. 20 bushels of corn hauled to town brought about $10. 40 bushels distilled into 120 gallons cleared 150, provided nobody paid the federal tax. The local law frequently sided with the moonshiners. Captured men drew light sentences. Sometimes the revenue agents were the ones prosecuted for injuring the men they came to arrest. And it turned lethal. In 1897, a federal marshal and one other man were killed approaching a still in Searcy County. The guns had come out of a catalog. Now the federal government was riding into the hills where they had stayed. Number 6. The A.J. Aubrey shotgun. Andrew Fearberg opened a small sporting arms factory in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1898. The following year, he did something most manufacturers of the era refused to do. He contracted his entire output of shotguns to Sears, Roebuck and Company. That refusal was not squeamishness, it was survival. Retail merchants hated the mail-order houses, and a maker who sold to Sears risked being boycotted by everyone else. So Sears solved it with money. Richard Sears lent Fearberg the capital to expand and took an interest in the firm in return. Fearberg went from 15 guns a day to 200. Sears also picked up his patents, including a front sight patented on the 6th of November, 1906, which the catalog then gave away free with any gun purchase. See what that means? Sears was not merely selling guns to rural America. Sears was financing the factories, buying the patents, and setting the production rate. A shotgun in an Ozark cabin in 1910 existed at that scale because a mail-order company in Chicago decided it should. Remember the name Fearberg. He is going to come back at number 3, and when he does, it will change what you think this man was. That is the machine that armed the hill country, not a gun runner, a retailer with a printing press and a loan department. Number 5. The cut-down musket. This is a real entry in the 1901 Sears catalog gun section, printed under that name. The cut-down musket. An old military long arm with the barrel shortened, sold as cheap utility iron to whoever wanted one. Nobody blinked. A shortened gun in 1901 was not a category, it was a bargain. It was what you bought when a full-length musket was more gun than you needed. Sears listed it between the shotguns and the flintlocks like any other line item. Hold that thought, because it is the hinge of this entire list. In 1901, cutting a barrel down was a manufacturing decision, a way to move surplus. 33 years later, the federal government would look at exactly that act and decide it defined a criminal category requiring registration and a tax. The same modification, the same country, sold openly on a catalog page inside one lifetime, and prosecuted before the Supreme Court inside the next. It came out of a catalog, and the law came for it later. Number 4. The Harrington and Richardson 38. This is the one that survived, and you can go and look at it. It is an 1880 Harrington and Richardson revolver in .38 caliber. Guns of this class were dismissed by collectors for a century as cheap goods, turned out by firms competing on price at the bottom of the market. They were the guns of shopkeepers and mechanics and farmers. The working man's revolver. This particular one was dropped by Bill Cook during a gunfight with lawmen in Indian Territory. It was picked up afterward by Due Wisdom, the Indian agent for the 5 civilized tribes, and it stayed in the Wisdom family until they donated it to the National Park Service. It is held today at Fort Smith, Arkansas, on the edge of the same hill country the Marshals rode out of. Sit with that chain of custody. A cheap catalog revolver came off an outlaw in a shootout with federal officers, passed through a federal Indian agent, and is now a preserved artifact of the United States government. Every other gun on this list is a category. This one is an object, with a shelf and a room you can walk into. The catalog sent it out. The hills kept it. And the federal government ended up its custodian. Number 3. The Iver Johnson Safety Automatic. Here is Fearberg again. Before he ever built a shotgun for Sears, Andrew Fearberg was an engineer at Iver Johnson, and in 1894, that company introduced a revolver built around something he designed, a transfer bar, a small piece of metal that sits between the hammer and the firing pin and rises into position only when the trigger is pulled fully to the rear. The problem it solved was killing people. The ordinary practice of the era was to drop a revolver into a coat pocket with the hammer resting on a loaded chamber. Knock that hammer, and it fired. The Imperial War Museum describes Iver Johnson's mechanism as the earliest on this principle and the most advanced safety feature of its day. Fearberg's patent issued in 1896, number 566393. The company sold it with a slogan you could not misunderstand: "Hammer the hammer." The advertisements showed a man striking the hammer of a loaded revolver with an actual hammer. Roughly 250,000 of the first model were built in 2 years, at about $6 each, and the idea did not die with the company. Bill Ruger built the transfer bar into the Blackhawk and the Single Six in 1973 and into the Vaquero after. The safety in a great many revolvers sold today descends from a solution engineered for a cheap mail-order gun in 1894. The Ozarks were full of them. Top break, thumb the latch, the barrel drops and the cylinder ejects, 5 or 6 rounds, cheap enough to own without making a decision about it. $6 out of a catalog into the hills. And the best safety engineering in America was riding in a hill farmer's coat pocket before it was ever in a Colt. And then it ended. The National Firearms Act took effect on the 26th of July, 1934. It did not ban guns. It did something quieter and far more effective. It required registration and attached a heavy federal tax to a specific list of weapons: machine guns, silencers, rifles and shotguns with barrels cut below a set length. For the first time, a category of ordinary American firearm carried a federal paper trail. The catalog era, in which a man mailed an order form and received a gun with no record of any kind, was closed by a tax stamp, and the enforcement did not slow down either. In the 4 decades that followed Prohibition, federal agents seized roughly 6,000 stills across Arkansas and Missouri. The guns had come out of a catalog. The hills had kept them. Now Washington wanted them counted. Number 2. The Winchester lever action. In the 1880s, the Ozark Hills around Taney County, Missouri, echoed with the sound of Winchester rifles. That is not a phrase invented for a video. That is how the historians of the Bald Knobber era describe the sound of those years. The Bald Knobbers were vigilantes, formed in Taney County around 1884 and spreading into Christian and Douglas counties, riding masked, enforcing law and morality as they saw it in a region still coming apart from the Civil War. Their founder was killed. By the end of the decade, the largest groups were finished, leaving a legacy of fear that took a century to fade. And the rifle in the middle of all of it was for sale in the mail. The 1901 Sears catalog carried the Winchester line by model number: the 1873, the 1886, the 1892, the 1894, the 1895. The rifles that armed one of the most violent decades in Ozark history sat on a printed page between the fishing tackle and the sewing machines. Lever action, tubular magazine, a dozen rounds as fast as a man could work the lever, accurate enough to end an argument at 400 yards. Nothing else the catalog sold could do that. It came out of a catalog like all the rest. But every other gun on this list was a tool that could become a weapon. The Winchester never needed the conversion. Number 1. The Stevens double barrel, cut under 18 inches. On the 18th of April, 1938, Treasury agents arrested 2 men moving a shotgun from Claremore, Oklahoma into Siloam Springs, Arkansas. The men were Jack Miller and Frank Layton. Agents had been watching them already, because both were suspected of moonshining and of bank robbery. The gun was a double-barrel 12-gauge Stevens with the barrel cut to less than 18 inches. An ordinary catalog shotgun, shortened with a hacksaw. The same modification Sears had sold openly at number 5. Under the National Firearms Act of 1934, that shortening now made it a registered, taxed weapon, and it was not registered. What happened next was not what the government expected. In the Western District of Arkansas, the district judge sustained the defense and threw the indictment out, holding that the National Firearms Act violated the Second Amendment. The government appealed straight to the Supreme Court of the United States. The court reversed. It held that without evidence that a shotgun with a barrel under 18 inches had some reasonable relationship to a well-regulated militia, it could not say the Second Amendment protected the right to keep and bear that particular instrument. And then something extraordinary happened, or rather, failed to happen. That decision stood as the only Supreme Court ruling on the Second Amendment for the next 70 years. Every argument about firearms in America for 3 generations ran back through a cut-down catalog shotgun carried across a county line in the Arkansas Ozarks. It came out of a catalog. It stayed in the hills. And when it finally met the federal government, it rewrote the law for everyone. Go back to that first page and look at the whole distance. A company that would mail a working firearm to any address in America with no check of any kind. Hill country where the roads ran out and the corn was worth more distilled than hauled. Federal men riding into those hollows after the stills, and juries who would not convict. A marshal killed at a still in Searcy County in 1897. 6,000 stills seized in the decades after. And in 1934, a tax stamp that closed the catalog for good. 15 guns came into those hills the same way the flour did. One of them is in a federal museum. One of them went to the Supreme Court. And the safety bar in the cheapest revolver on the list is still in production today. If that catalog landed in your mailbox in 1901 and you had one order to place, which of these 15 would you have sent for? Tell me in the comments and tell me why. Subscribe. There is more of this country's forgotten arsenal coming.